Just so you understand the meaning of the word Jesus, his Hebrew name is actually identical to Joshua. The reason why Jesus and Joshua are two different names is because, number one, the main reason is because it's a different language. Yeshua is Hebrew, Jesus is Greek. But it's essentially the same name, which means Yahweh saves. Yahweh saves. Now, what's interesting about this name is when you understand why Jesus got that name, it suddenly changes the understanding. It says in Matthew 1:21, she will bear a son, and again, this verse was brought up earlier. She will bear a son, and she shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. Now, if you're reading this in English, you really are at a disadvantage. Because the Hebrew, if you understood the Hebrew meaning behind it, it makes a world of sense. Call his name Yahweh saves, for he will save. What is the angel calling him? Yahweh. Call his name Yahweh saves, for he will save. The angel is calling him Yahweh. That's right there in Matthew chapter 1. You don't have to go very far into the gospel to get that. In fact, it is so clear that the very next verse says that, and this was to fulfill what the prophet Isaiah said, that he shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. Who was with them? The baby just came. So it's very clear in context that that's what it refers to. The name Jesus itself, used in the way the Gospels is used, is indicative that he is divine. Number two, Son of God. By the way, in your notes, Jesus is Yahweh. Number two, Son of God. Here we need to distinguish vocational sonship from biological sonship. In today's day and age, most people identify sons as being something only biological. There's nothing vocational about it. It's only biological. But in the ancient Jewish mindset, the idea of sonship was not merely biological, it was very much vocational. In other words, you would always do what your father did. If your father was a carpenter, you would be a carpenter. So what did the New Testament mean when it uses the word son? And here I submit to you that the New Testament is preoccupied with the idea of vocation when it uses the word son. In other words, Jesus is not a biological son of God. When the New Testament talks about sonship, it is vocational. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Do you think that the scripture means when you basically are peacemakers, suddenly you'll be biologically born of God? No, that's not what it means. God is a God of peace. That when you are a peacemaker, you are vocationally doing what God does, and in that sense, you are a son of God or a daughter of God. Same chapter, few verses down, Matthew 5:44. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray to those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Well, you mean to say when I love my enemies and I pray for those who persecute me, voila, I become a child of God? No, that's not what it means. It means vocationally you're doing what your Father does, because it says there right in the text. Verse 45, for he, your Father, makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So that when you see, God blesses those who curse him, and God actually sends rain and sunshine even to those who hate him, so that when you love your enemies, you are vocationally doing what your Father in heaven is doing. And in that sense, you're the son of God. Can you see vocational? Let's go on. This one, John chapter 8. Jesus is saying biological, starting with the biological. I know that you are the offspring, that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you are trying to kill me because my words find no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. They answered him, Abraham is our father. What do you think they are referring to? biological, maybe even vocational. But Jesus takes issue with that. He said, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did. Do you see how Jesus ties in sonship to doing the works? So what if you're biologically descendants of Abraham? You're not doing what Abraham did. You're not children of Abraham. In fact, that's what he says next. He says, you are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. Can you see vocational? He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of all lies. What does it mean to say Satan is the father of all lies? Well, it means that Satan is maybe the guy who started out lying, and anyone who lies next is doing what he is doing. Vocationally, they are his sons, his daughters. So Jesus has that in mind. Now the question has to be, what did Jesus mean when he says he is the Son of God? He explains to us, John 5:19, truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. Friends, we can be sons and daughters of God when we do something that God does. But Jesus is unique in that he can do everything that God the Father does. Can you see the difference? The Son can do, the funny thing is this, Zakir Naik would quote this passage, but only stop in that first half of the verse. He says, Jesus says he can do nothing of his own. God can do anything and everything. God is omnipotent. But Jesus can do nothing on his own. He is not God. Read the same verse. The verse is not over. Jesus says the Son can do nothing of his own accord. There's a comma there. Even the sentence is not over. But only what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son can do. If God can create, Jesus can create. If God can raise the dead, Jesus can raise the dead. If God receives worship, Jesus can receive worship. Whatever the Father does, he can do too. He is the unique Son of God.